Okay, let me make a little introduction to these situations with the boys. When I was a young guy, maybe eight, oh God, starting at maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. My grandfather, who was very, very special and very, very dear to me, was a man that came up from New York, ran a pool parlor in New York on Mott Street. Mott Street, for those of you who don't know, is Little Italy. Little Italy is pretty famous, pretty synonymous, San Gennaro Fair and all that. Okay? My mother was born there. My grandfather ran a pool hall, I guess in the early 1900s, 20th century, so 1910, 1915, 1920, I think around that area. Don't hold me to exact dates, before he came up to the farm. He wanted to get the kids out of New York. He felt just unsavory situations, unsavory characters that were friends, but didn't mean he wanted to have them attached to his children and stuff like that. So he moved the family north. Along with that, when he bought the home, there were in those days called summer kitchens. They were like for outdoors, a building like behind the house, the original house, that was basically a building that had screens, no windows, screens all the way around. And then it was usually a stove, and those stoves at that time were coal or whatever, wood burning, and a sink. And that was about it. They can boil the water to make pasta. They can cook whatever foods or meats or whatever the case may be. And it was a very large table that could hold, 20, 25 people. Okay? And I remember it like it was yesterday. And alongside that, my grandfather had a couple of like cabins where, you could come up for the weekend, his friends, and instead of staying in the house, if he didn't have room, he had a cabin or two extra to hold people. And every weekend there was couples, men, women coming up. It could be, I have no idea, 10, 12 on a weekend. Could be as little as 6 or 7. Could be as much as 15. They would come up, and of course I was a little guy. And being a little guy, they always thought I was cute and this and that, and play with me and whatever the case may be. And it can't be much past 12 years old because my granddad died, and I'll never forget the date, August 5th, 1955. I was 12 years old. They'd come up, and I was used to wonder, as a young guy, I said, gee, they got beautiful clothes and beautiful shoes, and everything was like, their cars were brand new Cadillacs or Packards or Oldsmobiles, all new. So of course it left my little mind to wander. And as you can see, I'm a wanderer of tale here. And I remember that vividly, like I'm talking to you today. And why I'm telling you all of this is that there's a whole story that goes with it, that those individuals that used to come up, as I said, were friends of my grandfather, who was for my dad. Well, actually, my dad had already, with my mother, born me, but they were very special. They were special to my granddad, and they loved him, and they loved me. They showed affection, and on and on and on. And it was a very, very, very beautiful time in my life. I used to remember that my grandfather, Monday mornings, I don't know, I guess I put two and two together in my own little mind. Again, somewhere around 7, 8 years old, whatever I was. And I used to see him get all dressed up, put on his beautiful shoes, black polished, great pinstripe suit, white shirt, round collar with the stick pin through the collar of the shirt, and tie, and comb his beautiful, beautiful white hair. I've got a picture of it. And he used to get on a train. My Uncle Tony, the oldest boy, used to take him to the train station in Poughkeepsie, New York. And I used to go to my grandmother, "Where's Grandpa going all dressed up? He's a farmer." And she used to go in Italian, which I'll explain. Zitto. Quiet. No, don't talk. So, of course, I shut up. About 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever the case may be, he'd have the train come, and my Uncle Tony would meet him around 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, that Monday, bring him home. And that was it. Every Monday, my grandfather would go into New York. As I got older, I got a little bit wiser, and I started to think that, gee, maybe my grandfather was going to a meeting, like on Monday mornings or something in New York. For whatever reason, I didn't know, you know. But then the culmination kind of came when my granddad died, August 5th, as I told you, 1955. They came to his funeral. My Uncle Pete had just passed, 26 years old. He had died in a head-on collision in 52. And my grandfather dying 3 years later, we really feel was a result of he loved that one. That was his second son, and they did everything together, hunted, and those are stories I will tell you later on. I'll never forget that time. I was 9 years old. Those days, they didn't have funerals or wakes like we have today, where you go to a funeral parlor over the last 30, 40 years or so. But they had them in the home. Or at least my uncle was there, and my grandfather, when he died, was in a home. They took like the bedroom, emptied it, and put the casket in there. Well, when they put the casket of my uncle in, and then they decided to open the doors, I'll never forget that day. They were all the family, my mother, her sisters, the brothers, and there was a doctor, Dr. Harris, and they open the doors like French doors, in a sense. And open the doors, and you see the casket. My uncle, 26. Well, my Aunt Fanny, my mother's youngest sister, she fainted. With that, my mother fainted. And it just became total pandemonium. And the doctor was injecting to resuscitate them and get them up. It was just something that is indelibly etched in your brain. I haven't forgotten to this day. That had to be, 48, 58, 60, almost 70 years ago. So, my grandfather, after the funeral, they had the funeral, of course, the headstone and so on, he used to go to the grave. He loved them so much, he thought that Petey liked coffee. Very touching for me to tell the story. He brought him a cup of coffee, put it on the headstone on the portion where it protruded out. And he used to smoke my grandfather, Prince Albert, in a can. He used to roll his own cigarettes. And he used to light it, and he used to leave it on the corner of the stone. And of course, coffee, like water or whatever, eventually in the sun, all would evaporate. Cigarette, left, if it was continued to burn, it would burn out. My grandfather, in his own mind, thought that Pete had drank the coffee and smoked the cigarette, and every day he went for 3 years until that fateful day. August 5th, 1955. He got a coronary thrombosis, I guess, clot to the heart in the artery that eventually stopped the blood. And he died instantaneously. There was a large stone wall built around like a retaining wall to hold the grass and lawn back from a big, big oak tree. And he was talking to his brother, his son Tony, and the youngest son, who was about 8 years younger than Pete, Joe, just graduated high school. It was in his last year of high school when Pete died. And he told Tony, and I'll never forget, Tony, don't forget, you got to go to the feed store in New Paltz and get. And with that, he fell over. And he hit my Uncle Tony on the right calf. My uncle turned around like, what the hell? And he saw his father. And he was dead. Of course, they didn't want to believe it. They said, Dad, this and that. He was dead. So you can imagine 3 years later, here is the father dying. Part of that, I really, really believe, nobody will let me believe that it was caused by the death of that son. Yes, it was a medical reason, but brought upon, I think, by. Again, they had the wake in the house. And again, in the bedroom, and same situation 3 years later. I was 12 years old. They opened the doors, and in those days, I don't know how it is today. I haven't been to one in the last 15, 20 years, thank God. But they had books of individuals that would come. And I don't know, it was like them writing in the book on each line their name. But also with their name, they left an amount of money. And of course, me being an inquisitive young guy, which I guess you could see by these videos, I used to look through the books at night. And I used to see Joe so-and-so $500 and this you're talking 1955, and this guy $1,000, and this guy $1,500, and this guy $500, and this guy $250, and this guy $100, another one $500, on and on and on and on and on. My Uncle Tony said, listen, they're going to go back to New York, and I think what we ought to do is put some apples, 42-pound box of apples in their trunks. And the cars were like brand new Oldsmobile black, brand new Cadillacs, brand new Packards. And I would put the apples in, and before you know, when I opened the trunk, I would see, like a submachine gun or something like that, and I would say, Uncle Tony, and he'd say, shut up, in Italian. He'd say, again, quiet, don't make a scene, just put them in there. So I put 2, 3 boxes, I opened the next one, there it was, and on and on and on. Anyway, time went on. After it was over, my grandfather was buried. They counted the money. 1955, my grandmother put $40,000 into a into a pillowcase bag. Keep in mind, my grandmother, she wanted to be a nun. That was her dream. She wanted to be a nun. So she felt that the money that was given was basically the money of the devil. So she said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this money to a church in Milton called St. James, where the whole family, my father included and mother, got married. St. James Church, and there was a Monsignor there. And she gave it to him. About 3 days later, they were looking for the Monsignor. There was no Monsignor. He was gone. He evidently took the money and he took off for points unknown. We don't know. They got a new priest or whatever to come, to the church, but Monsignor, I don't think was ever to be heard of again. But my grandmother would not touch the money. She never would. When my grandfather died, I was an altar boy. I wasn't an altar boy doing it every Sunday, but I was an altar boy for my grandfather's funeral. I'll never forget how beautiful it was. The whole town, it must have been. And I was a kid. I counted the cars in the procession. It was 125 cars. New York, they all came from all over. My Uncle Pete, nosy kid that I am at 9, I counted those cars. It was close to 120. So you could see the kind of respect, admiration, whatever they had. I kind of leave that there for the time being and let you know that that lets me or leads me into my next stories that I would like to mention based on the knowledge, based on the meeting of these men that I had seen when I was a young boy. And we will take it from there on the next video. If you've enjoyed the video, subscribe if you'd like to hear more. Thank you very much.